Hello, I'm Marty Schaefer, Chief Distribution Officer at Ethos Life. We at Ethos Life are thrilled to be a sponsor of NAILBA's Summer Symposium and the keynote speaker, retired Rear Admiral Paul Becker. It's an honor to introduce you, Rear Admiral. The Rear Admiral served 30 years as a Navy intelligence officer in peace, crisis, and combat. His assignments included Director of Intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the International Security Assistance Force Joint Command in Afghanistan, as well as leading the Presidential Transitions Intelligence Community Landing Team with policy input and strategic guidance to new administration cabinet secretaries. His unique combination of military, business, education, leadership, and medical patient experience combined to provide innovative insights into improving global risk management, along with organizational and personal performance. Innovative ways to improve the life insurance experience and process is the backbone of what we do here at Ethos Life. We take great pride in providing faster, better, and easier life insurance experience by offering same-day coverage with no medical exams and affordable policies. Ethos Life is breaking new ground in the life insurance market and are a proud sponsor to support the following presentation from retired Rear Admiral Paul Becker. Enjoy the meeting.
Thank you, Ethos Life, and Marty Schaefer for that nice introduction. I'm Paul Becker. I served for 30 years as a naval intelligence officer around the world, afloat and ashore. My last 3 assignments in uniform were as the Director for Intelligence, or the J2, with the International Security Assistance Force Joint Command in Afghanistan, where we were focused on the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, the U.S. Pacific Command in Hawaii, where we were focused on China and North Korea, and for the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon, where we focused on, well, the world. You'll notice there are only pictures for 2 of those 3 last assignments. That's because we couldn't find one where I was smiling at the Pentagon. And the picture where I'm in the full battle rattle at a security checkpoint at Kabul International Airport is with a Marine Reserve Sergeant whose full-time job is as an NYPD sergeant who knew my dad, a former NYPD officer, who always told the folks on his beats in the Bronx and in the Queens that he was part of their life insurance policy as well. So in my last role in the Pentagon, I was the principal threat advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for issues ranging from the cybersecurity, to space, to transnational, to conventional, to nuclear topics. It's an overused expression, but not in this case when I say there was never a dull day at the office. I've never been an independent life insurance agent and broker, so I can't tell you I know what the profession is like a true insider. However, when I left the military several years ago, I did establish my own consultancy, and I'm familiar with starting up and maintaining a small independent business. And I can also assure you that I place a premium, no pun intended, on life insurance for me and my family. When I was in uniform as an intel officer, my principal task was to find out what the enemy didn't want us to know. In doing so, I often had to make sense of ambiguous indicators, evaluate scenarios, and ultimately make recommendations to a combat commander to take a certain course of action, to mitigate risks to our forces. At the same time, I was responsible for developing plans to protect information that I didn't want the enemy to know about us. And these efforts fell under the banners of counterintelligence and cybersecurity. I believe there's application of all those skill sets to the insurance profession, making sense of data, balancing risk to provide a decision maker the best planning options, simultaneously protecting the client's personal identifiable information, plus defending your own and other business portals and gateways. So with that as background, I wanted to go a little deeper on cybersecurity and ensure you that the core of my remarks will neither be tech-centric nor compliance-heavy. In my experience, and I sense we've all experienced this over the past couple years, those type of video broadcasts are a recipe for a snooze fest. So rather, my comments will focus on some best practices and human factors to keep your situational awareness high so that you may enact the best cybersecurity options for your brokerage general agencies. Hey, there's no doubt about it. Insurers, large and small, are on cyber attackers' radars, and attackers are getting away with it. Cyber criminals are caught at the most, according to the World Economic Forum, just 1% of the time, which is why independents like ourselves should not expect law enforcement to fix the problem. Cybercrime is a growing evil business model. It's not news that cyber threats are the top global risk for the financial sector in general. However, it is news that the frequency of incidents and the magnitude of their impact has increased. Leading the list of the most affected, according to a Bank of International Settlements 2021 study, are number 1, payment institutions, number 2, credit unions, and wait for it, number 3, insurers. Insurers of all types are natural targets for cyber attackers because they possess substantial amounts of confidential policyholder data. Products, policies, and pricing, they're all powered by data. This is what makes it so valuable. With data, an insurance pro is able to offer the consumer just what they need at hopefully just the right price. More choice, lower costs are what makes consumers so ready to share their data. In contrast to other sectors, which hold mainly sensitive financial data, insurers typically also collect a large amount of protected personal and sensitive information and valuable unstructured data, such as emails, incident reports, and contracts. So, what are the consequences of a breach of your network? Well, the main consequences suffered by insurers following cyber incidents are business interruption and material costs, both for you, the business owner, the policyholders, plus third parties. Stolen data can be used for different criminal purposes, such as identity theft or to obtain financial gains, both for which you could be potentially liable. And besides, the direct financial consequence of business interruption, there may be severe, long-lasting, or even irreversible reputational damage to you. So insurers need not only manage cyber and IT risk with the company and the value chain, but they also need to keep pace with the threats and developments in the field. The field of cybersecurity as a whole tends to focus on technology, but there are a lot of people involved in cybersecurity as practitioners. So whether you're a company of 1 or you're a company of 10, I want to focus this conversation more towards that people aspect of cybersecurity. So I'll start with a question. Why can't we solve cybersecurity problems with technology alone? If you answered because there's a human dimension to cybersecurity, that's a bingo. Small business agent brokers may mistakenly think they fly under the cyber criminals' radars. But the Small Business Administration warns that these type of small businesses are attractive targets because they have information that is often not protected by the same security information as the bigs. Plus, small firms are more likely to flounder after a cyber breach because they typically have fewer resources to recover. And just because you're the founder, owner, president, CEO, or CFO of your own insurance business, you are not out of the criminal's field of fire. According to a Barracuda Network's 2021 report, hackers often target high-value accounts. For takeover of those type accounts of CEOs and CFOs are almost twice as likely to be taken because they have access to high-value accounts and are better for gathering intelligence or launching further attacks within an organization. So broadly speaking, any independent broker agent should consider 5 major security threat areas that their business must defend against. The first is computer hacks. According to a 2021 Hiscox report, Hiscox is a British Bermudan insurer, About 15% of small businesses attacked in 2020 almost went under after being breached. That report also placed a direct cost of a cyber attack for small business at $25K. A Fundera report, a small business loan company, from the same time frame was more alarming. It highlighted that 60% of those attacked go out of business within 6 months of a breach, and small and medium business costs could run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And this doesn't even include the indirect costs: loss of data, hours spent on recovery, loss of customers, litigation, and loss of reputation. If you don't have a virtual private network or a VPN already, I'd recommend looking into them for your business. They're fairly low cost. They're highly effective tools to help prevent hacks. The purpose of a business VPN is to provide end-to-end encryption for every device in your company's network, which means no snoops, no hackers, or even your internet service provider cannot see your location or data. This provides a private, secure connection to the internet, no matter where you are. They're practically useful, and when not physically in the office space, they allow you access to your own company's network over a secured, encrypted connection. Ransomware threats is number 2. In its 2020 Internet Crimes Report, the FBI says ransomware threats increased 20% from 2019 to 2020, about 2,500 total cases. At the same time, the total costs of attacks increased more than 200%, from 8.9 mil in 2019 to 29.1 mil in 2020. And not specifically mentioned here are the cousins of ransomware. That's malware and viruses. Both of those are on the rise as well. My colleague, Bob Gourley, founder and the CTO of the cybersecurity firm OODA, or OODA, which stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act, estimates more than 80% of viruses, malware, and ransomware threats can be avoided by ensuring you have the most up-to-date patches on any system you're using. Number 3 is data leakage. Insecure external storage devices are the primary cause of data leakage. Occasionally, sending data to the wrong recipient and weak passwords also fall in this category. Any portable device can fall into the hands of unauthorized personnel. Theft is always a concern. My dad, the cop, had a rule of thumb: never leave anything in your car that you can't afford to lose. This particularly applies to your computer carrying case when you're on the road. Number 4, phishing scams. It's not just computer novices and the elderly who are vulnerable to phishing scams. Just ask insurance giants like Unum and Paul Revere Life, which recently had to pay state regulators 1.8 mil in penalties for cybersecurity violations. I'm aware of smaller penalties for other insurers in Virginia and Oregon as well. No doubt there are more examples. And number 5, insider threats are negligent. Open computer screens in a public location, use of unprotected local Wi-Fi networks, passwords on sticky notes, bad, bad, bad. We have an expression in the Navy: small leaks sink big ships. You know, one of my favorite basketball coaches of all time was John Wooden of the UCLA Bruins in the 1960s to 70s. He emphasized flawless execution of the fundamentals when winning 10 NCAA championships. And on the first day of practice, every year, even for returning upperclassmen and championship teams, all that was done at practice, number 1, was putting on socks and lacing up sneakers to avoid unnecessary blisters and twisted ankles, and then dribbling and passing to maintain possession, and then running and running to build up stamina. No shots were taken. The fundamentals. Basic computer and password hygiene are fundamental. So it's my experience that many small businesses fall into the trap of assuming that cybersecurity challenges are caused solely by technology shortfalls. While it's undoubtedly critical to have the right tools in place, too many overlook human factors that they ought to consider. A large amount of security incidents, 40% by conservative estimates, are caused by human behavior, such as susceptibility to phishing, negligence, or insider threats. Companies could have all the tools in the world at their disposal, but if the root cause is driven by human actions that aren't practiced and protected, well, then the business remains vulnerable to a breach. So what are the critical human factors in cybersecurity? I'll limit it to just 3. Number 1, prioritization. There's a lot of things we do as small business owners, but what is most important to your insurance business is the question. It's impossible to have multiple number 1 priorities. It's my opinion that artificial intelligence, or AI, and machine learning, ML, they can't get you over the hump when it comes to making a number 1, number 2, number 3 business priority determination. That comes from your reflection. And if others are involved, communication and collaboration by incorporating their diverse professional opinions as well. In my case, my best collaborator is my wife, Kim, whose comments on my prioritization sometimes ranges from, "What? Are you nuts?" to, "Yeah, that makes sense, but we also need to think about fill in the blank." Number 2 is investment. Cybersecurity is an investment. It is not a cost. It's C-suite level business, even if you are your own C-suite. The answer isn't throwing money at new tech, but investment could be taking time to research and understand the cyber terrain of this business space so you can train with the best tools that meet your budget. At a minimum, read cybersecurity companies' threat reports. Many are available at no or low cost online. Training. The most successful organizational teams I know all had or have a plan for when the poo hits the fan. Recent headlines underscore the importance of small business owners having a written security plan to protect the privacy of their clients' personal information. Not only could a breach of clients' personal information devastate an independent insurer agent broker's reputation, it's likely to result in their agency having to undertake some time-consuming and costly actions on behalf of clients whose PII was compromised. Plus, now there's the very real possibility of incurring a fine. So just as a well-managed agency takes specific steps to protect against errors and oversight risk, it needs to have a security plan and a cybersecurity incident response plan in writing. It's not hard to put a pen to paper or fingers to a keyboard to come up with a 1 or 2 pager. It's not that different from the business plan that many of us had to write to get our own companies or LLCs started. And of course, the security plan must be aligned with the business plan. Then, once a month or so, tabletop wargame it. See, I figured I needed to use a military phrase like war in there somehow as a former officer, but I didn't want to use a trite reference to Sun Tzu. So tabletop wargame was it. Simulate a breach of your network. Script a scenario, a different one every time based on what you hear or read about what is occurring in the business space. Devote dedicated time for yourself or others in a room and play it out to completion. Hopefully, you'll never have to exercise it. But if you do, I guarantee a significant return on this time investment. So now, the 2 words you've been waiting to hear. In conclusion, and there's a bunch of recap lines in case you missed some key points along the way. For many small businesses, dealing with cybersecurity can feel like an unfair fight. After all, if large organizations like Target and Sony and Verizon and heck, even our own government's Office of Program and Management can be accessed and can't keep the big guys out, how can an independent agent broker keep them out? As unachievable as it may seem, there are some simple steps that we as small business owners can take to reduce our own cybersecurity risks. I'll start with a cybersecurity framework. Now, frameworks provide a map, a blueprint for building a cybersecurity program that manages the risk to data and reduces the vulnerabilities to a business. If you need a place to start, look at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The acronym is NIST. The Cybersecurity Framework, CSF. Together, they go by NIST CSF. The NIST CSF is the gold standard amongst the cybersecurity framework professionals, both nationally and internationally. The best defense is a good offense when it comes to cybersecurity, and that's why frameworks can be so helpful. The important thing to remember is that cybersecurity is not just a technology issue, as I've already mentioned. It's a human factors issue. So there are 5 core components to the NIST CSF framework: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. A quick touch base on each of those 5. Identify. Where do you stand now? The first step in any cybersecurity strategy is to assess where you are today. Conduct a risk assessment of your business's IT environment. A risk assessment should include asset management, outline the business environment you're operating in, any governance that you must meet, like HIPAA regulations, a risk management strategy, and a supply chain risk management strategy. Identify current vulnerabilities and develop an action plan of what your organization needs to fix. It's critical to determine how much risk that your organization can tolerate in the event of a breach. Talk to your own business insurer carrier about whether a cybersecurity policy covers all the possible breaches. Number 2 is protect. How do you continually protect your business from cybersecurity threats? Well, protecting includes identifying access control points, both physical and online, awareness and training, data security, information processes and procedures, up-to-date maintenance patches, and utilizing the right technology to protect your organization, such as VPNs or virtual private networks. Detect is number 3. Continuously monitor your network. Detection is key to identifying potential breaches. A comprehensive detection program should include notifications of anomalies and events. In addition to protecting an organization's firewalls and switches and servers, endpoints need to be monitored with security information and event management tools. So what's an endpoint? Well, it could be a desktop, a laptop, a smartphone, a tablet, a server, a workstation with a remote connection to the network. Each endpoint creates a potential entry point for security threats. Now, many VPN network providers offer this type of service. Take advantage of it. Next is respond. How will you respond in the event of a cybersecurity breach? Tabletop wargame it. This should include a communications plan to all your stakeholders, notifying them of the incident, an analysis of the event, mitigation of future events, and what improvements can be made to prevent incidents in the future. And finally, recover. How will you bounce back from a cybersecurity incident? Once an incident's been stopped, it's important to have a post-incident meeting. In naval aviation, it's called the post-flight debrief. And in the Army and the Marine infantry, it's called the after-action review. You go over what happened. How did it happen? When did it happen? The steps that need to be taken to address the breach, what changes need to be made in policy and procedures? How do we improve our education and awareness? What tech changes or additions need to be made to reduce the probability of future breaches? Look, implementing a cybersecurity framework for a small business can seem daunting with all the other priorities that exist for independents like us. But like David and Goliath, it can feel like we small business owners are weak compared to the cyber threats out there. But keep in mind, doing something, like even David throwing a rock against Goliath, it'll benefit your organization more than doing nothing at all. Take small steps that enable you to implement a cybersecurity framework one stride at a time. Hey, fellow small business owners, the goal of all these efforts is increased performance, productivity, and profit. I've seen it work. I'm confident of your success with applying these human factors and best practices that fit your independent brokerage general agencies. So finally, as we say in the Navy, fair winds and following seas. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining today. My name is Gary Weber. I'm the founder and CEO of AccuPoint Solutions. Today, we're going to be speaking on the topic of data. Data is being positioned as the answer to growing a book of business. But what does it really mean? And is it easier said than done? And joining me today are our panelists, Nathan Jacobson, who is the Executive Vice President of Simplicity Group, Lisa Todd, who is Head of Life and Disability Insurance Distribution at Mass Mutual Strategic Distributors, and Mark Verbos, the Executive Vice President at Aimcore Group. So thank you all for joining today. Lisa, we're going to start with you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Kind of start at the beginning. So do you believe that data is the answer to growth for your firm? And if so, why? And if you don't, where does it play a role and how important is it for you?
Yeah, thank you so much, Gary. I do believe that data is the answer for us. And the reason I say that is because data is the foundation on how this new channel was established at Mass Mutual. We looked at industry data to see what was being sold and by whom. And because of that, this channel came into formation. So when we think about that today, we're utilizing data to manage our business on a day-to-day basis, but also inform all of the decisions about how we want to grow and where we choose to take our new channel. So we've leveraged data a lot in the last 16 months. And where we've really sort of focused that is in some of the prioritization work that we have to do. Given our infancy, there's a lot of work to do. We can't get it all done, given everything that's changing in the environment and in the industry today. So what we've done is we've leveraged and looked at data to try to identify the impact of all of our competing priorities and what the expected outcome is, and to take a look at, is that outcome something that benefits our distribution partners as well as our strategic goals? For example, is there a technology implementation that we need to prioritize to create a better distributor experience, thus, enhancing their service levels and their NPS scores and so on? And we're going to use that data in that way to be able to try to drive our decision making. We're trying to help our distribution partners meet their goals as well as support our own.
Okay. So data is important to you in your channel. How about to your company overall? Does it take place as the number one view as well? Or because obviously you're focused in on it?
Yes, everything that we are doing, it's one of our core principles, is that we will be a data-driven organization. And to that point, the company as a whole has established quite a few various data science centers with various partnerships with various universities across the Northeast.
Okay. And Mark, I'm going to ask you a question. It kind of fits in a little bit with kind of the timeline that Lisa just mentioned. But sure. In your mind, what makes data more important today than it was, let's say, I say 10 or 15 years ago, but even 5 years ago? Or in your mind, has the importance stayed the same?
Yeah, Gary, thanks. First off, thanks for having us. It's always a pleasure to see everybody, even if it's virtual. But, I don't know that I would say that data is more important today than it was 10 or 15 years ago. I think it's just as important. It's not like it wasn't important 10 or 15 years ago. That being said, though, I think analytics have come a really long way in a pretty short period of time. And because of it, now we can use data to aid in multiple aspects of operations, sales, and it can be a game changer for businesses. That being said, to get maximum results, companies need to know how to properly utilize the technology and improve the quality of the data. And I think that's where we've seen a big shift over the last 10 or 15 years, is that the quality, the accuracy of the information that we have is no longer as reliant upon the user inputting the information into the system. And so while I don't think it's become more important, it's become more usable, if that makes sense.
Sure. Okay. And Nathan, just kind of back to the original question that we had, is data the answer to growth as well for you?
Yeah, and to echo Mark, Gary, glad to be here. Thanks for having us on. I don't necessarily know that, data is the answer to growing our business. It's certainly one of the important ones. Relationships for our business are still very much key. However, our business, and I'd say all businesses exist to solve problems. And we really believe that data is extremely important to understanding the problems that our customers face. And I think that applies to both the advisor, and at the consumer level. There's just so much data out there that we're collecting via our marketing efforts and obviously available via third-party data sources that just help us communicate effectively with our customer. And, combined with our marketing data, that third-party data can really be extremely powerful. So I'd say it helps us profile our client to really understand who they are and the challenges they face. And I think that's really where the data is most important.
Okay. And just to stick with you, Nathan, on this. So if you can, without giving away any secrets, what are the top 1 or 2 initiatives that you're working on today with data? You mentioned profiling the client, but are there others? Is it direct sales or marketing or analytics or anything like that?
Yeah, we're really heavily focused on using data in our marketing and recruiting efforts. We're engaged in a lot of digital marketing efforts, which really provides real-time data feedback to us on the effectiveness of the marketing efforts that we're conducting. We really try to follow the agent and sometimes the consumer through the customer journey, because it can help us provide extremely important data for our recruiting efforts. Analytics are obviously key, Gary. Using the data that we gather, and without analytics, the data is just not that helpful to us. One of the things that we just recently kind of set out on is building out an analytics team to really measure the effectiveness of our sales and marketing efforts.
Okay, great. And if you would, just to add on to what you're talking about, I know each and every day I talk to people about digital marketing. It seems to mean something different to everybody. How do you define digital marketing?
There are a lot of applications, Gary. I think the most relevant today is social media. LinkedIn, Facebook. I think there's still so much more power in those platforms than we're effectively tapping into today.
Okay, great.
So does Elon Musk.
We'll see if that deal goes through.
Right, exactly.
And Mark, since you raised your hand, I'll go to you next. What one initiative are you involved with that might be different from Nathan's? And are there others, I guess more as important to this question, are there others that you'd like to institute, but you haven't? And what would be the reason you haven't?
Yeah, I think, we're doing a lot of the same things with data and with digital marketing, like Nathan just covered. One of the other things that we use or rely on data for is carrier analytics and insights. And so what we've done basically is we've taken the real-time information and data and put it into Power BI dashboard that allows our marketers, our case designers, the folks on the front end, on that illustration side of things, to really formulate recommendations and manage producer expectations before the app's taken, whether it be cycle times, placement ratios, placement or approvals as applied for. We're doing a lot with that information because we all talk about this, right? Sometimes price or the lowest priced isn't necessarily the best option to go with. And so how can we formulate our recommendations, one, that consider more than just price in the recommendation, but two, also enhance the value of calling, one of our AIM core offices to get a recommendation or get support if you're a producer over maybe somebody else that you would call.
Mhm.
And so that's one of the big things we're focused on. In terms of something we'd like to do or get better at doing, we're doing a lot on the in-force marketing side as well, or in-force policy management side. We'd like to, and I'd like to see us get better at getting that information both from our internal AMS systems as well as from carriers, and getting more a standardized approach to how we take and aggregate that information to formulate, actionable next steps and follow up, to Nathan's point, to kind of follow the client through their journey the whole way past policy issuance and into the various life stages that they'll go through over the next 15, 20, 30 years.
With the end goal of being with them the whole step of the way with product wise.
Exactly.
Okay. We talked a little bit too about analytics, and it kind of leads to the next question. And Lisa, I'm going to ask you this one.
Sure.
What experience do you look for in those at your firm that work with the data? So the people actually analyzing it, working with it, are they hard to train and find? And how does that experience, have you found, help you, either the lack of or an abundance of?
So I talked to several of my peers who have been doing most of the hiring over the last 16 months, because we have hired quite a few analysts to specifically to handle our data requests. And the number one response that I got back was that we are looking for people with curiosity. And so when I probed a little bit deeper, and as we were talking, and I thought about my experiences in working with our data analyst group, it's the individuals with curiosity that are willing to ask us questions as business owners about what are the key drivers of our business. And they will continue to ask questions, and they will question, well, why is it done that way? And it's in an effort to try to identify and drive to some of those key elements and key metrics that we're trying to zero in on. I have found that the individuals that are incredibly curious and have sort of no fear of failure and are interested in seeing if they can figure out if the path that they're down is going to give a positive outcome, or an outcome that will be useful. I think it's that sort of combination that's most effective. We've got lots of discussions with individuals who really didn't have any business acumen, and over the last 16 months have developed quite a bit of acumen, to the point where they're enhancing propensity models based on the conversations that they hear us as sales leaders having every day, without having to have sort of side conversations. It's pretty remarkable how advanced the folks have come in a very short period of time.
And is there, curiosity is great. Is there a particular background that you find is better? You mentioned business acumen. Is it, do they have to have been in this industry at all, or is that curiosity override everything?
Curiosity overrides anything. The individuals that we have hired into our team over the last 16 months had zero business acumen.
Okay. We're going to have to come up with a word, because as you're saying that, what we say over here is that you need to have a passion for the data, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same.
Yeah.
So somewhere in there is a combination of those two words that we'll have to come up with, passionurity or something that says what people want. Nathan, anything else that you would add to that? Are you also hiring people purely for analytics, and what is their profile?
We are, yeah. As Gary, I mentioned, we're building out a team as we speak. We've got some jobs posted right now related to this. And Lisa, I love the curiosity description. I mean, I think in terms of specific skills, Gary, I mean, I think it's powerful to have people who have background in the digital space. Like I said, social media, the other applications there. But I think looping back to what Lisa said, just people who are willing to not just take the data at the surface level, but dig a couple layers deeper, and see where it's applicable to our business, I think is, a couple of the main qualities that we're looking for in that role.
Great. Mark, are you doing anything on your end as far as profiling or anything? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're not doing much different than what's already been mentioned. One of the biggest qualities that I look for is somebody that wants to know more, wants to know why, right? We've got a person on our corporate team that we brought in 3 years ago. He handles our integrations and large scale project management. Didn't know anything about the life insurance business. Came from completely outside the space. And, I think that's important because one, they come in with a fresh viewpoint, right? They've seen other industries and what work in other industries, and they can bring that into our space. And they can apply it to our data. I mean, look, let's be real. We haven't been the best industry at utilizing our data, right? So if we can find folks from outside of our industry to come in and teach us how they've effectively done it in other spaces, that's really, really valuable. And what I liked about that individual is not only did they come in without any preconceived notion of how we should do things, but they also came in with a curiosity as to why we do things the way we do them and if we can do them better. And I think that's important. You don't get that from somebody that doesn't have that curiosity or that desire to learn and expand their knowledge and put the data or reasoning behind the data to understand it.
Right. All right. Well, we all seem to be in agreement there. That's great. So we're talking about analytics. We're talking about data. We're talking about lots of things here. Mark, what's the one metric you rely on the most to measure the effectiveness, right? So we've got the people and they're growing and they're learning. We're using the data for different things, but what are those metrics and what are they telling you today?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the metrics that I look at from a day-to-day basis, overseeing our business development, our distribution side of things is the opportunities, right? The opportunities and the conversion rate, those opportunities to apps to paid business, obviously, to commissions. And so we've created, I say we loosely because I am terrible at creating Power BI dashboards, but we've got some people who are really, really good at it that have created an opportunities dashboard. And that's one of the things I look at every day. We've, just by way of the structure of our organization and AIMCorps having, been comprised of 40 independently owned BGAs, member firms, as we call them, they're on various different AMS systems. And we don't have the capability necessarily to direct or influence which AMS system they're on. What we've been able to do, though, is take the data from the respective AMS systems, pull it into a standardized system or environment like Power BI, and recognize the conversion rates, see who's doing well, see who may be struggling, get them paired together so that they can learn from one another. We can do best practice sharing and really enhance everybody's opportunity and effectiveness.
And Lisa, as having probably one of the newer divisions from what I'm hearing,
Yeah.
how about you? How are you looking at the metrics? And I think, have those metrics then enabled you to either look at other data points or particular data points more closely and maybe even throw some out?
Sure. So when we think about some of those data points and some of the metrics that we're looking at, one of the things that I think has been really interesting on this experience the last 16 months is one of the first things that we establish is what are sort of the metrics going to be. So if we're going to be doing a webinar or a series of educational sessions, or if we're going to be doing a social media campaign, The first thing that we do is we will meet with, if it's a social media campaign, we'll meet with the marketing group, and we will sit down and have a conversation about what are going to be sort of the success metrics that we use, and what's the frequency going to be, and how will we be able to leverage that and evaluate the effectiveness of that campaign. Same thing from a webinar, from an educational session that we're doing. It's important to sort of identify those before, so that you can then, structure and tailor your messaging or the work that you're going to do, and be able to model out and to determine whether or not you've been successful in trying to identify having the impact that you had modeled.
Is there anything that's ever surprised you? So in other words, you went into a campaign and thought, I think this is going to be fantastic, and then the data told you something else?
Not yet. A really interesting example is something that just happened over the last couple of months. We've started a new social media series with a particular individual, and what we're finding is that one individual in particular will create an open rate on a social media campaign of more than 200% better than the industry benchmark.
Okay.
So it's finding the right person and the right message, and people will pay attention to it.
Right. Okay. Now, I'm going to follow up with another question with you, Lisa. How important is your current data, right? So we've talked a little bit, we've touched on there's some outside data, and then there's some proprietary data that you have.
Yep.
Clients or prospects that are just high up on your list. How important is that to your retention efforts, and how do you kind of combine that with third-party data?
Yeah, so the internal data in our data warehouses are sort of at the core of what we're doing versus some of the purchase data. And when we think about that, we're looking for ways in which we can leverage our internal data. To Mark's point earlier, is how can we create opportunity for our distribution partners? So one of the things that we are in the process of refining is a propensity to buy model. So as we look at not only our own data, but some of our distributors' data, if they're willing to share, can we look at the various data points from a life insurance sale, and can we potentially identify an individual's propensity to potentially purchase a disability product? That's offering an opportunity to some of our distributors that they might not have had before. Right. So there's lots of really interesting things that we're trying to find ways to leverage some of that data in different ways, bringing value.
Okay. And Mark, do you view internal data as equal in terms of how it helps you execute your plans? Or are you viewing it more important than external, or not?
I'd say it's evolved over the last, 3-4 years. So if you would have asked me this question 4 years ago, I would have told you I don't have the same level of confidence in our internal data as I would from an outside data source. And the reason for that is that data is information, and information is only as good as the accuracy of it, right? And so going back to a couple comments I've made over the course of the last few minutes, we have 40 agencies putting data manually into AMS systems, and those AMS systems differ between each individual agency, and not just differ because they might use agency integrator instead of smart office, but even the way that they put the information in the system or the fields that they require inside of their internal offices is vastly different from one another. And so over the last 3-4 years, and as we've gotten more and more engaged and our institutional business has grown to become more meaningful, we've had to find ways to standardize data input. And so what we did is we created a system that basically all of the data input has to be the same. It's all standardized. So for our institutional business now, today, I would say that, the confidence in our data is higher than that of an external source or data provider. And so we're utilizing that information more and more frequently to provide those real-time analytics insights into the carrier cycle times, propensities to buy in the future with the enforced data, and marrying that all together. But it's definitely changed for us over the last few years.
What's the penalty for not inputting the data correctly? Just
Um,
doesn't go in?
we don't really have a penalty. We leave that up to the institution. They figure it out pretty quickly, and then their compliance department comes down on us.
Right. Okay. Nathan, this is a question for you. Where do the metrics become softer, and how do you overcome those? So, for example, you hear people using data to go to conferences or to do some of these social media campaigns, but can you really measure them? And if you can't, how do you overcome that? Or do you just not use those campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, Gary. I mean, I think I circle back to what I mentioned earlier, just the overall customer journey. And what I mean by that is, like we're tracking everything that we do with our marketing efforts. I mean, what are advisors and consumers responding to? What events are they attending? And why? Where are we not getting good attendance? Where are they falling off in the sales funnel? Are we getting our reps contracting with us? If they're not, why not? Digging deep. And it goes back, kind of tagging on to what Mark said, accurately documenting everything. We utilize Salesforce within Simplicity Group, so that's the primary hub for our data collection. And so what I'd say is, how do we overcome that? It loops back to, again, digging into the analytics, and so just diligently following every step of the path, and hoping that it's going to provide us the right answers to continue driving the business forward.
Okay. Mark, this is a question for you. If data is so important, what would you do to make it even more effective? So in other words, in another way, what are your challenges today? And are there plans to kind of corral that, make it even more effective?
Well, we'll definitely think of better penalties for not inputting the data. No, I'm just kidding. I think, what makes it more effective is having data quality standards, period. You've heard it from all of us through pretty much every answer to the questions today, which is, we have to have confidence in the data. And if there's confidence in the data, then we can really use our entire imagination as to what we can do with it. Whether it's propensities to buy, whether it's just, one of the things that we've recently done is like a win back campaign, looking at information from 3-4 years ago and producers that haven't written a piece of business since, and formulating a campaign and messaging to get them to consider writing business with our offices again. But without those quality standards, you can see where, not only do you lose confidence quickly, but where it could really go sideways if you're sending the wrong message to the wrong person based on wrong information. And so I think, while there's certainly not a lack of information out there, the quality of data still leaves a little bit to be desired. And while we've gotten better, we can get even better. A study that I found interesting from Harvard Business Review looked at a data set and assessed quality of data at 3% as acceptable. So 97% of the data information that they looked at in this study was unacceptable and had inaccuracies. We got to get better at it. Yeah. And there's a lot of different ways we can do it. Standardization and having those quality standards are probably a good start.
All right. And for the last question, I'm going to ask each of you just to answer this one. What is the single most important trait related to the use of your data? And we've heard a lot of things here, and this is kind of sum them up. And you've said them at some point during this conversation, but rather than me sum them up, it would be great to kind of hear you sum up what you think that trait is. Is it the people? Is it the data confidence? What is it exactly? So Nathan, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. No, it may sound pretty simple, Gary. What I wrote down related to that question is that the data needs to be accurate or as accurate as possible, alluding to what Mark said, just the quality and applicable to whatever the campaign was. So, and what I mean by that is, we're trusting this data to make decisions around driving our business forward and delivering value to our consumers. So at all points possible, it needs to be high quality, accurate data that we're trusting to make decisions. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, Lisa.
I'm just going to echo what Nathan and Mark both have said. I think that you have to start with the quality of the data. I think that is imperative. I think personally, the sort of secondary sort of aspect of this is, I think you got to lean into it, right? So all of us are, experienced individuals, and, we've got experiences. And I think sometimes we're like, oh, well, that's what the data says, but does it really? And I think we allow ourselves to say, hey, is it really the quality of the data? And maybe that's not where it needs to be. I think that if you've got confidence in the quality of your data, you have to lean into it and go, okay, maybe my experiences, my anecdotal information is not the answer.
All right, thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nathan and Lisa have said, pretty much everything. The only thing I would add to it is, once you have the quality and confidence in the data, in order to lean into it, I think you've got to be able to take the data and put it into an environment and a dashboard or some sort of visualization tool that allows that data to be easily accessed and you to be able to make quick assessments on the fly. And so it's got to be in the right environment to be able to make and drive conclusions and take action. And whether that's Power BI, Tableau, there's a million different million different tools out there. Finding the tool and then making sure that your people are trained on how to use that tool is really important.
All right, good. So that concludes this discussion today. I think what we've heard, and thank you for the summations, is that data is the answer. It's not necessarily something that's being positioned today. It's been positioned for quite a long time, but we're getting better at it. We're looking at analytics. We're looking at the metrics after the fact and just getting better and better at it. So thank you all for your time. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you for everybody listening, and have a great rest of your day.
Hi, welcome to today's session on The Consumer is Interested, Now What? How to optimize the point of contact and application. My name is Scott Reinhart, and I'm a senior manager here at LexisNexis, overseeing the point of application for the life insurance industry. All the strategy and innovation and ways we can make things better for carriers, agents, and consumers. So our question today is, your consumer has raised their hand. Now what? Well, our goal should be a consumer-centric experience. And when I stop and think about this for a moment, there are really 4 key entities in our ecosystem today that play a role in this consumer-centric experience. The first, most obvious, is our agent friends. Secondly, carriers. Third, technology, software, e-app providers. And last, fourthly, data providers. We all have a role to play in driving a consumer-centric experience. We've also seen a digital transformation in the industry today, but we all also recognize that there's room for improvement. And when we look at everything we do, are we still continuing to put that consumer at the center of it all and really try and drive that experience for them? Well, here are some of the things that stand in the way from us really optimizing this consumer experience. And it's all about getting it right from the start. So these are our goals for really streamlining an optimal consumer-centric experience. The first is going to be increasing speed and efficiency. We've done very, very, very good things to drive and reduce cycle time in this industry, but we're still not placing a high percentage of policies within minutes. We can get better. There is a better standard out there. And I think, today I want to talk about how all four parties, when we're working together in unison, can drive this experience and really deliver on increasing speed and efficiency, as well as reducing blind spots for agents. So you guys have done a great job historically in the past, field underwriting your client, asking all of those medical questions that are important, and really looking at the landscape of available options for that client and placing them, making the best recommendation for them to place them with the best carrier, the best underwriting, best type of policy. It's going to be the best fit for that client. But with the advent of accelerated automated underwriting, that's really thrown a wrench into your field underwriting. You don't have a way to predict that, so to speak. So how do we reduce those blind spots for you so that you can better set the expectation and drive a consumer-centric experience? Thirdly is improving retention ratios. And you might think that this is a little odd coming this early in the game, but today in the market that we're under extreme inflationary pressures. We haven't seen inflation like this in 40 years. So when you do have a consumer that's interested in buying, you want to make sure that you are doing what is in the best interest of the consumer, you as an agent, you as a carrier, and keeping that consumer on the books for as long as possible. And then lastly is enabling instant decisioning. So getting rid of that disconnect and really shortening that cycle time between the application being collected and underwriting rendering a decision. And data is available today to render decision instantaneously at the point of sale. But again, all four parties, agents, carriers, technology companies, and data providers have a role to play in this. And I want to talk to you today about really two data platforms that LexisNexis has and how we play a role in this. But again, we can only do it in working with carriers, agents, and technology providers, showing how we can be one of the four cornerstones to delivering a consumer-centric experience. The first platform is our Life Data Prefill solution. And here in the middle, you see kind of the standard solution itself. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how that base and core solution solves some of the problems that we worked with earlier. But again, we can't do it alone, right? It has to be working in tandem with both agents and the technology companies to be able to do this, as well as other tools that we've attached to this platform, such as an accelerated indicator to reduce those blind spots for our agent friends. A family history indicator to, again, further help make sure you are setting the right expectation. And then lastly, a persistency indicator to help begin to improve those retention ratios at the point of sale. So this is really the foundation from a data perspective to enable and help the industry get it right from the start. So let's unpack this a little bit. First, in kind of the core and base solution to a data package that can be delivered real time to an agent in the field are the data points you see here in blue. And we only need a name, address, and a date of birth to deliver these data points to the agent to confirm with the consumer in the field. And let's pick on a couple of these. Social Security number and driver's license number. I don't think I need to stress the importance of these two data points in the underwriting and onboarding process. And on average, we see that a Social Security number is collected from an agent via the consumer. On average, is collected in error about 6% of the time. And a driver's license number is collected in error about 12% of the time. So right here, you have a large percentage of the time that your data is being collected in error and you're getting things off on the wrong foot. What does this do? Data goes to underwriting, goes to the carrier gets a no hit, sends it back to the agent. You, the agent, then have to go back to the consumer, and it creates a lot of friction. Consumers going, I already gave you this information. Why do I have to give it to you again? And to further unpack that statistic on a driver's license number, agents are really missing an opportunity here to put more people through the process. Many of those errors result in no hits, but if you get that correct, then you're going to get a good, clean, oftentimes clean underwriting hit, and you're going to accelerate more people through the process. And you can do this all because one data point was correct versus being incorrect. And with 50 different state formats, alphanumerical characters for a driver's license number, it's very easy to get this wrong. But we can shore this up and ensure that the information being sent downstream to underwriting is right from the start. Additionally, you see things here like phone and email address or household members that can be used as likely beneficiaries. There is no better experience than when somebody does come forward at claim time and their information matches what was on the application. That makes for a truly seamless and great claims experience. Also delivering on that customer centric experience that is the theme of what we want to talk about today. Next is, how do we reduce those blind spots for the agents? So I talked a little bit earlier about how you guys do a great job field underwriting, but again, with accelerated underwriting, you now have a blind spot. You don't know which carrier is going to be the best accelerator for your client. You don't know what that accelerated automated underwriting platform, what decision that's going to render back. It could surprise you, and that's never a good, positive, customer-centric experience. So we built a tool that is a point of sale tool to be delivered with prefill, the prefill platform, to reduce that blind spot. And it's a very simplistic but highly directional tool for you agents to close this gap. So our accelerated indicator receives and brings forth 3 very basic data points for you. A high probability that your consumer is a good fit for accelerated underwriting. If so, you should have all the confidence in the world to place that consumer in an accelerated underwriting program and move forward. A medium indicator representing that this consumer is not necessarily a bad risk. They actually could very well be a good fit for an accelerated underwriting program. They just may have to do a few additional steps. They may be triaged out to an exam, for example, but you should still try and put them into an accelerated underwriting program. You should not be shocked with declines and adverse decisions with this group. And then thirdly is a low probability. So here, if somebody wants to go and do an accelerated underwriting program, fine. Let them know that they may not be the best fit and that you want to have a plan B available if they don't go through the accelerated underwriting program. And this is all about allowing the agents to set the right expectation up front, give you another tool in your toolkit to recommend the best carrier and the best policy. So now what this could look like is, again, everybody gets a high indicator, confident to move them forward to any carrier that has an accelerated underwriting program. Medium, maybe those carriers that have a higher threshold of an accelerated underwriting program. And again, being able to set the right expectation. And then lastly, a low probability would be those carriers that aren't really offering an accelerated underwriting program, a more traditional underwriting program. So again, reducing that blind spots for the agents. Next is persistency model. So we talked earlier about retention, and with inflation, we're starting to see carriers come forward with retention being an issue, right? Maybe even there are going to be less buyers in the market because we all know that life insurance is purchased with disposable income. And so now you have the ability to receive an insight at the point of sale on that consumer. Is that consumer a high likelihood for an early lapse? If they are, does this change your conversation as an agent with that consumer? Are you now having an affordability discussion? So you've assessed the need. Maybe for an example, the need is $500,000 in life insurance, but instead of maybe $500,000 in a universal life or a 30-year term, maybe it's a 10-year term for affordability purposes to, again, ensure that this consumer will stay on the books long-term. So again, having insight, as well as maybe also to help improve retention metrics, right? You're having a payment plan discussion, right? What's going to be the best payment plan for you to be able to pay your bills long-term? And then also being able to narrow that target audience that you want to continue to stay engaged with from a retention program right from the start. And so this was our validation on this persistency indicator that we've put in as a point of sale insight. And what you see here is our ability to segment the consumer with the best consumers for retention falling in that lowest decile. You see here about a 2% lapse rate versus the highest risk consumers of lapse at an 18% risk of lapse in the highest decile there. So 9 times separation, but again, a very highly directional insight for you to understand who is a true risk of lapse. And this was performed over a dozen carriers that again have a lapse rate that is very common, very average, about 6.5% overall. So we feel like this is a very good representation of the market at large, and that you have a very good insight into who's going to be a possible candidate for early lapse. Lastly is the family history flag. And so here, another point of sale insight so that you are not receiving any surprise decisions, right? So here at the point of sale, if we know based on data that the consumer has a first degree parent or sibling who has passed prior to the age of 60, you can receive this insight and begin to ask those drill down questions on that family history, right? Further understand what was that cause of death. Was it from natural causes or accidental causes? That way, when one of the carriers at underwriting is pulling an electronic health record or an attending physician statement, they don't find something that was non-disclosed by the consumer, right? So again, you're uncovering this as part of that conversation early on to, again, help drive that consumer-centric experience and help get it right from the start. And on average, we actually see this happening about 9% overall in the industry. Next, I wanted to talk to you about enabling instant decisioning. So LexisNexis recently entered a partnership with ExamOne. And with our partnership with ExamOne, we are now able to render real-time data for both behavioral data and medical data, all the things that you would typically look at as a carrier at the point of underwriting. And we're able to package this together and get it to you, the carrier, in real time. So now we have a model that enables you to render real-time decisioning based on all the data that you're already very familiar with. And here's what it looks like. So public records, credit, driving behavior, prescription history, clinical lab data, and medical diagnosis, all rolled up into one highly predictive model where the outcome is greater than what it's made of, right? So it's really the 1 + 1 = 3. The sum is greater than its parts. And so what we have here is a model that has 13 times separation between the riskiest decile and the most preferred decile. You'll also notice that this outperforms a prescription-only based model. So again, really allowing carriers to go beyond just accelerating preferred and standard business. You really have the opportunity now to further and highly segment that business to render decisions table rated perhaps, but really, again, allow you to give an instant decision back based on data to the field to really optimize that consumer-centric experience. The consumer isn't waiting on an underwriting decision because you've got the data and you know what that risk is being presented from a mortality perspective and can price it accordingly. So we've talked about tools from a data perspective and how they interact with both a carrier and an agent, how they can complement the carrier's underwriting, how they can complement the discussion the agent is having in the field, discussions based on data, decisions based on data. But next is really taking a look back at where you're at today, right? So understanding where you're at in terms of data and technological sophistication. And this matters. This is really where all four parties, agents, carriers, technology companies, and data providers have a role to play in this to get to the most optimal level. First is our manual processes, right? So we do still see some paper applications. We also see some, what was really the next step up from a paper application to really account for legibility of a paper application, which is simply a digitized form of an electronic or of an application. It's electronic, but it's not connected. It's not online. From a carrier's perspective, on the right-hand side here, going up the vertical axis, what are you doing at underwriting? Do you still have a highly manual underwriting process, right? And so these are very time intensive. And it's not to say that you may not have the occasional case that requires this, but with the use of data and technology, we see the industry moving well beyond this. So we do see a lot of carriers and agents who are really at this level 3 and 4 stage. And so with level 3, you've now got an online interactive e-application. You can complete that application in the field and send it off to the carrier, send it off to home office to have it be underwritten. What is key here, though, is that it's disconnected from underwriting. So you are still waiting potentially days for the carrier to render an underwriting decision. That takes us to level 4. Level 4, you still have that same interactive e-application completed in the field, but now it is connected to that carrier's underwriting platform. And so if the carrier has that accelerated or automated underwriting platform and can enable instant decisioning, if the data is correct, then they can render that decision in real time. But you'll notice I said if the data is correct, because again, this is where the current hangup is with some of the more sophisticated users of technology. They don't have the data to really optimize the pass-through. So if a driver's license number, again, is incorrect, it's being kicked out. You haven't been able to necessarily identify at a carrier level any fraud, right? You haven't been able to have those conversations on affordability if you're an agent, right? So with the lack of data, you don't get to what is now level 5. And level 5 is really where, again, data comes in with technology and seamlessly works with agents and carriers to fully optimize this experience. And now you have data being pre-filled into your application that is accurate. It's going to ensure good, clean underwriting hits. You have insights as an agent to reduce blind spots and have affordability discussions. And carriers, you are optimizing the amount of policies that are being put through your accelerated underwriting program because the data coming in is good. And this is really what drives a consumer-centric experience. Data is good, you've set the right expectations, you've had the right conversations, and your consumer is wowed. So what are our next steps? What are our call to action? Again, we want to be that industry partner, be a cornerstone, the data provider that works with the technology companies out there, works with agents, works with carriers. So connect with us. We have a new case study that talks more in depth around some of these data points I've talked about today. We'd love to get that in your hands, along with our white papers for some of our underwriting solutions. Again, all to show how much this advances the cause of a consumer-centric experience. We're also happy to provide a demo of any of the things that you've seen here today, as well as perform benchmarking for you. Where does your data stack up compared to your peers? We can analyze that for you. So again, thank you very much for your time today, and we look forward to connecting with you and seeing you in person in November. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jared Spencer, sports psychologist, and I'm honored to be your keynote speaker for the NAILBA Summer Symposium. Let's get right to our content for today. And as such, I'm going to be sharing with you a keynote presentation via PowerPoint. I'm going to go ahead and pull that up, share my screen with you right now. It's an honor truly for me to be sharing this material with you. Thank you so much. Some of you may be saying, okay, Jared, who are you? What do you do? What's your background? Let me explain it to you in 1.5 minutes through this short little kickoff video. Let's take a look.
Jared Spencer is a sports psychologist and author of Mind of the Athlete and joins us now. Dr. Jared Spencer, a sports psychologist.
Dr. Jared Spencer, sports psychologist. Let's go now to Dr. Jared Spencer.
Do you feel there's more pressure on athletes today?
Absolutely. They've got to do more to teach them how to manage the pressure cooker, not just expecting them to manage it.
Mind of the Athlete is a sports psychology company committed to improving the emotional health of athletes. What fills you up? What gives you energy? You're an elite level athlete, and it requires a level of commitment that most people in the world might not even understand. What is your motivation?
Hey, I'm Dr. Jared Spencer, sports psychologist and your iFit guide. Let's go. I want you to be the emotionally healthiest version of yourself. I'm going to be teaching you really important and practical skills to be tools to put in your mental toolbox so that you can thrive emotionally throughout life.
Athletes are looking for that mental edge everywhere they can get it. I mean, the sports psychologists and working on this stuff can have a tremendous positive impact. Consequently, it translates to academic and athletic success, and usually they're on the way. The central message of Mind of the Athlete is simply this: clearer mind, better performance.
Well, yes, I'm a sports psychologist, and I love teaching athletes about how the mind works best. I'm going to parlay all of that from the sports world over to the business world and teach you, a remarkable leader, how the mind of the leader works best. That's exactly our title for today, Mind the Leader. And everything I'm going to do today is to really help improve your emotional health. I want to help you perform better in the specific leadership areas that you function every day. And I'm going to improve that performance by helping you be the emotionally healthier version of yourself. How are we going to do that? It goes back to that simple message: clear mind, better performance. Say that with me: clear mind, better performance. The clearer the 6 inches between your ears is, you know, and I know that you're a much better version of yourself. That's so important right now in our society today, because mental health concerns, especially coming through the pandemic, we're still in the pandemic, and the mental health concerns are rising like we've never seen before. So we've got to do more to understand, how do we recognize the emotional health concerns within ourselves, around us? How can you be the best version of yourself? Well, the key to being a better leader is being the emotionally healthiest version of yourself. Let me say that again: being the emotionally healthiest version of yourself. You may be in great physical shape, but how are you doing emotionally? Because your emotional health, that is what we need now more than ever, when an entire culture and society is struggling with mental health concerns. If you're the emotionally healthiest version of yourself, that's when you are going to thrive. So my point to you is, if you're not quite the emotionally healthiest version of yourself, then take better care of your mental health. Take better care of your emotions, because life is so emotional, and because it's so much, business is so emotional. You can't just keep going through with the suck it up, don't whine, don't complain. Remember this movie? Remember this one? What is it? Yes, A League of Their Own. And remember this famous line by Tom Hanks in this scene? What did he say? Yeah, there's no crying in baseball, right? Look, man, I'm part of that generation that grew up with the suck it up, don't whine, don't complain, don't express negative emotion. I get that. But in 2022, if that's your primary or your only way to deal with strong negative emotion, as a leader, you're really going to be limited in your ability to connect meaningfully with other people. We've got to take better care of our emotional health. So how can I best help you with that today? Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm going to teach you how the mind works best. I'm going to explain to you a model for how the mind works best, because up until this point, you're having success. You're doing a great job. But let me ask you, I mean, has anyone ever taught you how the mind actually works? I mean, do you actually understand it? Because obviously you're having great success in so many areas of your life, and you understand the importance of the mind. But up until this point in time, somebody probably didn't really explain it to you, how you could be the emotionally healthiest version of yourself, how you can have a clear mind and better performance. So let me explain that to you now by asking you this question. Have you seen the movie Titanic? Of course you have. If you haven't, you're missing the all-time greatest movie in history. Maybe it's going to be beaten by Avatar 2. Actually, it was beaten by Avatar 1, and now maybe it's the second best. Maybe Avatar 2 might come up there again and knock it off. Here's the point. When the Titanic hit the iceberg, it didn't seem like it did a lot of damage, right? Where's most of the iceberg? Below the waterline. That's the same analogy for your mind. Your mind is like an iceberg floating in the ocean, and everything you see above the waterline is your conscious mind. You're consciously aware of the blue suit that I'm wearing, the Baby Yoda behind me, the sound of my voice. You're consciously aware of this stuff. But 90% of your mind is subconscious. And the waterline, well, that represents your psychological defenses, your skills and ability to block out what needs to be blocked out and stay focused on the task at hand. Let me tell you something. Your psychological defenses, well done, outstanding. When it's time to focus and block it out, you're amazing. But even the very best people need more defenses, because the subconscious mind, 90% of your mind, is much more complicated than you might realize. In fact, the subconscious mind is broken up into 3 very important layers. Allow me to explain. The bottommost layer is called the unconscious mind. It's that part of your mind where those red dots, those emotionally charged life experiences are stored. The unconscious mind is first 5 years of life, some significant traumas or dramas. The reality is you don't remember much from the first 5 years of life, do you? I mean, do you remember your 4th birthday party? I mean, you were there for it, right? But you don't remember it because it's stored down there in the unconscious mind. The next part of the mind is a term that I coined. It's called the ex-conscious mind. It refers to that part of your mind where outdated, less useful information is stored. For example, do you remember your 21st birthday? Yeah, it's coming up. It's one of those red dots, and as you think about it now, it's working its way through your pre-conscious mind. It'll break through your defenses, and all of a sudden you're saying to yourself, oh yeah, I remember that now, right? Who were you with? Where did you go? Was there any liquid refreshments involved? What was your experience like? And as that red dot comes up, it brings with it other red dots from that whole time in your life, and thus it hits your conscious mind and you say, wow, yeah, I haven't thought about it in quite a while until now, but you get the point. It's in the ex-conscious mind because that's not going to help you thrive today. You're not going to excel because of that knowledge and wisdom. And so the point is, things in the ex-conscious mind are emotionally resolved and they're solved, and they're just processed and put away in a good spot. The key to your high performance is your pre-conscious mind. The pre-conscious mind's like the back burner of the stove. I mean, you might cook the chicken on the front burner, but on the back burner is where the rice is simmering. By definition, Sigmund Freud called it this: the place in your mind where memories are stored that easily can be recalled, but they're outside of your immediate awareness. Outside of your immediate awareness. Oh, you become aware of what's in the pre-conscious mind when you are listening to a keynote like you are right now with me. I mean, you're listening to me, but you're having a conversation with yourself the whole time, aren't you? I mean, you're thinking about all these random other things besides exactly what I'm trying to teach you, because all those random red dots are things in your pre-conscious mind. You become aware of them when you put your head on the pillow and you try to fall asleep at night, and now you really start thinking about what's in the pre-conscious mind. Or maybe you do some of your best thinking when you go out for a walk or out for a run by yourself, pre-conscious mind. Or in fact, have you ever been driving in your car, you get alone time, some think time, you get so deep in thought in what's going on in your pre-conscious mind that you actually miss your exit? I mean, that literally happened to me this summer. I was driving my car with the GPS on, and I still missed the exit because I was so deep in thought in my pre-conscious mind. Now, when the pre-conscious mind is clearer, it's never clear, it's clearer, you feel really good. Your mood is up, your productivity is up, you're a much better version of yourself. Your kids enjoy being with you. Your spouse, significant other, enjoys their time with you because your communication skills are a bit clearer, your energy, you just radiate it, and it's positive and uplifting when the pre-conscious mind is clear. The trouble for you and me and most people in our culture, society today, the pre-conscious mind's flooded. And that's especially true for you as a leader, because one of the things that I'm seeing at this stage of the pandemic is that as some people start to feel better, leaders crash last. That time has no meaning in the pre-conscious mind. So all those red dots, they may have been 6 months ago or even 2 years ago, And they may be emotionally charged events from the pandemic, but the point is, it feels like it's right there for you. To illustrate this point that time has no meaning in the pre-conscious mind, I want you to think about somebody who maybe served in the military, maybe is even Vietnam years ago, but to them, it could feel like just a moment ago, and it's right there, unresolved, emotionally charged in the pre-conscious mind. And what we know for people that go through traumatic experiences, and the pandemic, yes, has been a very difficult traumatic experience for many people, is that there's a lot of unresolved, emotionally charged life experiences that have been in there, thus making everyone's life a little bit more flooded, and particularly for you as a leader, as you try to hear other people's hurts and their struggles and their fears. What ends up happening is that you internalize that a little bit. Your pre-conscious mind is flooded. Am I hitting on something here with you? I mean, do you resonate with what I'm saying to you right now? Privately, you might present well, but personally, that pre-conscious mind might be draining you of your precious emotional energy. There's a lot more going on in the pre-conscious mind for you and for people around you. I'm going to prove it to you right now with a little test. You saw me just inadvertently flick through that next slide. And in that slide, I'm going to give you a little basketball test. Now, if you've taken the test before, just go along with it. If you haven't, here we go. It's a 26-second basketball test. A team in white shirts is going to pass basketball to a team in white shirts. A team in black shirts is going to pass basketball to a team in black shirts. I want to see if you're good enough, sharp enough, perceptive enough to accurately count the number of passes by the team in white shirts only. Are you with me? 26 seconds. Team in white shirts only. How many passes? Ready, set, go. How'd you do? At least 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, maybe 17? But did you see a gorilla beating its chest? Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Jared, you're telling me there's a gorilla beating its chest in that video? I mean, I'm a great leader. You have no idea the pressure. If there was a gorilla, I would have seen, right? Well, let's watch the same video again. Here we go. Same video. One more time. There he is, walking through, beating his chest right in front of us all, and walks off. Man, don't worry if you missed it. I missed it too. And when I give keynote speeches, thousands of people I'll show this video to, nearly 90% of the people will miss this. They'll miss the gorilla. Why? Because all I have to do is sprinkle competition over you and say, let's see if you're good enough, sharp enough, right? And you're like, game on, man, I'm gonna get the number of passes. And we're so focused in our worlds today of focusing on the score, the outcome, the number, getting it right, winning, that we sometimes can miss something like a gorilla right in front of our face, beating its chest. That gorilla, that's the mental health concerns within you. Maybe your family members, maybe your teenage son or daughter, maybe the people that you're leading your company. The mental health stuff is right there, but we're missing it because we're so focused on our conversations on score, productivity, to-do lists. And we're not really saying to ourselves in each other, like, how are you really doing? Like, when you really ask somebody what's going on, how are you really doing? You're really inviting them to share what's in the pre-conscious mind. And there's a lot more going on in your pre-conscious mind, in the pre-conscious mind of the people you're leading. All right, I know what you're thinking. All right, Jared, that's rolling good, but just tell me the number of passes, right? Did you say 15? You're wrong. 14, you were right. 14, and you saw the gorilla is the correct answer. So 14 doesn't get you bonus points, only 14 with the gorilla, and then you would have been successful. Did you get that one? Don't worry, if you like this video, check it out on YouTube. You can share with other people too. Okay. Under stress, we all regress. I don't care who you are, how much money you have, how famous you are, how many degrees after your name. None of that matters. I get to work with some of the most amazing people on the planet, and I'm telling you that under stress, we all regress. And when we regress, it can feel like our brain just doesn't even work, right? Here's my x-ray from a couple years ago. Oh, I know, I look like Homer Simpson, right? Well, the point here is that sometimes, I don't care who you are, it's like your brain just shrunk, man. It just feels like it's hard to make a decision or have emotional capacity, or that you've got the ability to have vision or resolve problems more effectively and efficiently. All that happens when we get stressed, we regress, and the preconscious mind gets so flooded. In fact, when it gets flooded, here's how it affects people the most. This is what I've seen. Just nod your head if you agree with this. Have you experienced some tossing and turning, trying to fall asleep, or in the middle of the night, can't go back to sleep? Yeah, that's insomnia from the flooded preconscious mind. Or anxiety. Anxiety attacks in particular are the result of a flooded preconscious mind. Now listen carefully. Anxiety is the fear of the unknown. I'm not in a psychobabble, keep it real simple. Anxiety is the fear of the unknown. And anxiety is so high because we just don't know what's going to happen moving forward in our worlds. Energy level, I mentioned it earlier, but emotional energy level is the key. Again, great physical shape, but how you doing emotionally? And when the preconscious mind is flooded, that's when we get emotionally tired, drained, fatigued. And that is one of the biggest problems I'm seeing. I mean, are you tired? Because it's probably low emotional energy. Number 4 is misguided tensions, and, pick your poison, but we all have the vices that we step into when the preconscious mind gets flooded. So often we want to resolve that tension, but we do so in a misguided way. Maybe it's overeating, or maybe you're looking to drugs or alcohol or other vices you might step into. Somehow, some way, maybe you said something hurtful or maybe even inappropriate, and you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. You said it, the damage is done. You release that hurt in a misguided way. And lastly, when the preconscious mind gets flooded, it's depression. Depression is hurt held inward. And when you hold emotional hurt in, when you suck it up, push through, bury it, that is going to lead you to either implode, which isn't very healthy, or explode, which usually causes even more problems. And then you got to clean up that mess. I don't want to see you imploding or exploding, having anxiety attacks, or be so tired emotionally, misguided tensions, or toss and turn in the middle of the night. All of that can be avoided if we can somehow find a way to get relief from the flooded preconscious mind. If you don't, you're going to break. And everyone breaks. I don't care who you are, everyone breaks. Even our best soldiers can only be in harm's way for so long. We got to get them out of there, because when that preconscious mind gets flooded, it begins to really wear down on those psychological defenses. And those psychological defenses in you, I mean, you're good. I mean, you're really good. You've got great defenses. But can they hold up to the flooded preconscious mind for 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 months of a pandemic? And the answer is no. I mean, privately, the answer is no. I mean, sometimes publicly, you can put on the face and you can front like you got it all together. But the reality is the preconscious mind is wearing out your defenses very likely. And those defenses, they've been taxed and stressed for too long. And I know you know what I'm talking about. Some days you just feel like, I just can't go on one more day living my life the way that I'm living. And then it happens. You break. You break emotionally. And when you do break emotionally, here's a model for what's really going on. the psychological defenses can't hold back the things in the preconscious mind. So something comes up, you and your spouse have an argument over something so insignificant, but it turns out to be a big deal. Or maybe there's tension with a coworker and it turns into be something far more complicated and messy than it was ever intended to be. Things from the preconscious mind come up, and when the floodgates open, it begins to hook into your loaded issues. Now, you know, and I know that we all got some issues. I got loaded issues, man. We all do. And when those loaded issues get hooked into, they come up too. And when that does, we get emotionally charged, emotionally overreactive. You might say to yourself, I don't know why I'm so upset about this. It's because the floodgates are open and it's hooking into a lot of other stuff. What are common loaded issues? Well, tell me about how things are going with you and your in-laws. Tell me how things are going with money and finance. Tell me how things are going with losing, or how are things with illness and sickness, death. I mean, all these are really loaded issues. And so all kinds of really common things can stress us out and bring up our issues. And when this occurs for you, or maybe somebody you love, this is when your head's in the pillow and the tears are running down your face. And you just feel like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm just so drained. I'm so tired. I don't have it in me. This is particularly what's happening with our youth in America, as they are struggling so much with mental health like we've never seen before. And it's happening for so many great leaders that I get to work with. When they barely keep it together, they get in their car. And as soon as they get in their car, the emotional breakdown occurs and the floodgate opens, and emotionally, they really are struggling. Are you relating to what I'm saying? Have you been there? Of course you have. And I'm saying to you, you're not alone. I'm saying to you, you're not alone. I've been there. We've all been there. And especially lately. And I don't want you to have that breakdown. In fact, I want you to do the opposite. I want you to find a way to be emotionally stronger through this. Now, of course, this is where I got to lead this to link this with athletics, right? I mean, you're wondering hey, you're a sports psychologist and you're talking to us about business stuff. Yeah, okay, here's the deal. The essence of sports is this, break down your opponent physically, and he or she will break down mentally. So when I help teams and athletes, basically, two teams line up and they compete, and then somebody's in better shape, and then they score, they get a high, the other team gets a little bit of an emotional low. But listen carefully. In every athletic competition, there's a moment where you can sense and feel the other team break. It's like they don't want to cry out there, so they just kind of give up and give in. They take their foot off the gas, and essentially the game's over. They're playing, but the game's over. They broke. And so when I help athletes to succeed, we do so by making sure that they don't have this emotional breakdown before the people they're competing with. And we do that by keeping the preconscious mind clear and the psychological defenses stronger. And so I want you to win too. In whatever area that you're competing, if you have a clear preconscious mind, and now you know what that means, then your performance is going to be much better. And as I just mentioned a moment ago, how do we do that? Two ways. When I meet with people here in my private practice, or virtually, most of it's on Zoom nowadays, the way we do that is we build up the psychological defenses and we clear the preconscious mind. When we build up the psychological defenses, that's really the skills and abilities to put tools in your mental toolbox. That's the outside in head knowledge, like read these books and learn the skills and have technique to better manage interpersonal tensions and complicated dynamics, for example. And if you can do that, the outside in head knowledge, the more you're listening to a great podcast, or maybe you're watching some YouTube videos or reading a great book, then suddenly your skills get much better. That's the outside in head knowledge. That's building your defenses. So I ask you directly, what book you reading? What podcast you listen to? What YouTube videos are you watching? And if you don't have some, you can read my books, or you could watch my videos. There's over 500 on YouTube. The point is, there's so many wonderful people on the path. Get on the path and keep building your defenses. But if you do that without the other half, it's not nearly as effective. And a lot of people may say, yeah, I'm actually really into this stuff. I really read a lot. I get the outside in head knowledge. Good. But the inside out part is the more complicated. That's the better part. To make the preconscious mind clearer, we have to experience catharsis. What's catharsis? Can you come up with a definition? I mean, just think of anything off the top of your head. Anyone? Yeah, come on, I'm an easy teacher. Here we go. The process of releasing and thereby providing relief from strong or repressed emotion. You just can't keep burying it in the mind of a leader. It's got to come out in some way. Just let it flow and let it go, right? You know the movie? Yeah, Moana? Yeah, remember this great actor who played this character? Yep, Dwayne Johnson, AKA The Rock. The point is, sometimes you just got to be like him and just let it go. Just let it flow. And when we do that in a healthy way, obviously I'm biased to legally protected conversations with like a psychologist, for example, behind closed doors, that's where we really can take those things in the preconscious mind and process it. Let me explain to you this way. When somebody I connect with, and I'm like, and I say, how you really doing, man? I'm like, how do you really feel about that? You know, it's an invitation to bring up something from the preconscious mind to the conscious mind. And then we work it through, we talk about it. And then it's like, all right, I emotionally diffused the bomb and I don't need to talk about it anymore. It's no longer a pressing issue. What just happened there? Well, that topic, that red dot from the conscious mind goes now to the ex-conscious mind. Here's an example. Maybe it's a holiday and you went with family to a gathering. You love your family, and like me, we've got great relationships with family members, but sure, they're complicated at times and it's confusing and messy. And sometimes you get in the car and you have to vent to your spouse and say, could you believe what so-and-so said or did? And until you actually vent about it, you don't really feel that great about it. But once you get off your chest and you receive some validation or some empathy or some encouragement or support, then it's like, all right, we don't have to talk about that anymore. Holidays can sometimes be like that. And my point is that you emotionally diffuse those bombs, you experience catharsis, and then it was emotionally solved and resolved, and it's sunk. And when you do that little by little, the preconscious mind actually comes clearer. But it takes work. Hard work, like Dwayne did. You see, I'm standing recording this for you today. I'm standing in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where I live. And ironically, who grew up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, went to high school, Freedom High School? Yes. Dwayne, who we knew back in the day as I played high school football against him, as DJ. And DJ is one of the toughest guys I've ever met along my journey. And if he can say, it's okay not to be okay, and if he can say, you know, man, I wish I had somebody to talk to about my stuff. And if he can say how battling the hurt settled in where the depression is real, then hopefully this is validation for you as well to say, you know what, I can actually deal with this. I can talk to somebody about this. I can work this through. I can get validation and I can get some help. And that's what I want for you. But don't take my words for it. Listen to this interview from DJ talking to Oprah about a time in his life when he really struggled with depression.
I found that with depression, one of the most important things you could realize is that you're not alone. You're not the first to go through it. You're not going to be the last to go through it. And oftentimes it happens. You feel like you're alone and you feel like it's only you and you're in your bubble. And I wish I had someone at that time who could just pull me aside and, hey, it's going to be okay. It'll be okay. So I wish I knew that. Just got to remember, hold on to that fundamental quality of faith. have faith that on the other side of your pain is something good. After about a month and a half of staying in that little apartment and cleaning, I got a phone call from the head coach of the team who cut me, the head coach of the Calgary Stampeders. He called me and he said, "Hey, I know we cut you, but I'd like you to come back." I said, "Okay, I appreciate that, coach. Thank you very much. I'll think about it." He said, "Okay, great." I hung up the phone and my dad said, "You gonna do it, right?" I said, "No, I don't think so. I think I'm done with that." And he goes, "What?" I said, "My gut tells me I'm done." He said, "What are you gonna do?" I took a deep breath. I said, "I'd like to get into the business." He said, "What business?" I said, "The wrestling business." He says, "You are throwing it all away. It is the worst mistake you will ever make." He said, "You're ruining your career." I said, "Maybe I'll be no good. But I feel like in my heart, I have to do this. And I either need you to train me or need you to not train me." My dad rose to the occasion, said, "I'll train you." And it wound up being one of the greatest chapters in my life.
Man, I hope somebody can come alongside of you. Maybe you've got to reach out to somebody, maybe reach out to a counselor, a psychologist, maybe a trusted friend, an advisor, somebody come alongside of you, say, "Hey, I'm going to help you through this." I mean, the old school way in sports is like, "No, thanks, man. We're good. We're just going to work hard." It's like, how about work smarter, not harder? Put those wheels on that bad boy there, and those rocks are going to be so much better, right? And so what I'm saying to you is maybe it's time for you to think about managing that emotional stress in your life in a slightly different way. How do I know it's helpful? Well, I lived it. I mean, people often say to me, "Jared, you're a sports psychologist. You help with these amazing people. Like, how did you even get on the path?" Well, here's the story. I talk about it in my book, Mind of the Athlete. In this book, which really does break down a lot of like what I'm sharing with you today about the preconscious mind. I was a 16-year-old high school athlete sitting on my bed in my parents' home on Firth Street in Phillipsburg, New Jersey. The tears were rolling down my face and I was crying. My mom heard me crying. She poked her head in the bedroom. She said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I'm not." She said, "What's the matter?" And I said these words to my mom that I'll never forget. I said, "I don't want to die, but I don't want to live another day like this either." Her eyes got real big. She said, what are you talking about here?" I said, "I'm not talking about harming myself, hurting myself. I'm not there. But what I am saying is I can't go one more day feeling the way that I feel. I can't take it anymore." You see, to the outside world, they thought I had it all together. I just captained my team to a state championship in wrestling, led my team to a conference championship in football, being recruited D1 in both sports, I had all A's and B's, the pretty girlfriend, the cool friend, supportive family. I was even the 4-time class president. But on the outside, that looked good. But on the inside, I was just a 16-year-old boy buckling under the pressure of every day having to perform at the highest levels and always be a great leader. I just needed a break. Have you ever felt like you needed a break? Have you ever felt like sometimes it's too much? Every day, going out there and leading. To my mom's credit, she heard my heart that day, and we made the necessary changes in my life immediately. First was I didn't go out for the track team. I was supposed to break the school's 800-meter record, but I didn't even want the record. Unfortunately, coaches and teammates were so upset that I didn't come out for the team that I actually got ostracized by many of them, shunned in the hallways, not talked to. That was my punishment for no longer competing and performing for other people, right? Sick, twisted, isn't it? But the reality was, like, I was expected to always perform. I just needed a mental health break, and I got it. And during that spring, little by little, I started learning about how the mind actually works. I started clearing out my preconscious mind. I started talking about all those emotionally charged things that were in there. I started building my psychological defenses. And little by little, incident by incident, that preconscious mind got a little bit clearer. And my confidence grew as I finally had some skills to actually manage the pressure cooker that I found myself in. And eventually, by the time August came around in my senior year of high school, my preconscious mind was clearer. Again, not clear, but clearer, much clearer than what it was. And I was ready to get after it. I was ready to thrive. And that's what I want for you. You see, when you live a lifestyle of really working on your mind just as much as working on your body, and you get the preconscious mind clearer, all that good stuff, it was inside of me. It's still inside of you. All that love and creativity, the intelligence, it's like all in your subconscious mind. It just gets buried when the preconscious mind gets flooded. It blocks it from flowing. I mean, you want to say to that person, I love you, but the I love yous don't come out as quick. You want to be funny with your family members, but it doesn't quite roll off your tongue as quick as it maybe would if your preconscious mind was clear. I mean, sometimes you after vacation is really good to you because you're actually fun on your vacation and you're more patient on your vacation. You see, the psychological defenses kind of work like a permeable membrane. When, remember permeable membrane from school allows things to pass freely back and forth through a cell. When the preconscious mind is clearer, those defenses relax. And when they relax, like stuff can flow back and forth. That's when you're thriving. You're the best version of yourself. You're the emotionally healthiest version of yourself. You've got intelligence. You're solving problems with ideas that came to you from like 20 years ago. It just comes up in a millisecond, right? You're quoting that old, stupid, funny movie, but at that right moment, it got everybody laughing. But you see, when the psychological defense is locked down, it's almost like when you were in school. Remember when you took that exam and you knew that the stuff went in your preconscious mind when you studied, but you just couldn't regurgitate it on the exam because the defenses were locked down. But after the exam, you're walking back to your dorm and you're like, oh man, now I remember what happened there. See, the defenses relaxed a little bit and then the material came back up. When you're literally living your life as a leader using all your mind, not 10%, just your conscious mind. When the defenses are relaxed, you're using all your mind. That's when you are crushing it. That's when you're thriving. That's when you're excelling. That's what I want for you when you really work on keeping that preconscious mind clearer. Hence our slogan for today, clearer mind, better performance. You apply that concept to your life from this moment forward, and you will be in a much better emotional place. You'll be the emotionally healthier version of yourself. And that's what I want for you. Get your better performance by being emotionally healthier. We need you now more than ever as a leader to take care of your own mental health so you can help other people take care of theirs. And so hopefully today, through our time together, you now know how the mind of the leader actually works best. Man, I love being part of this amazing conference with you guys today, the symposium, the summer symposium. And I'm hoping that you'll continue to go down this path of learning about the mind. And of course, there are other great speakers and opportunities for you. Take full advantage of those opportunities and get on the path, stay on the path of learning more and more about how the mind works best. Of course, if you want to connect with me, Instagram's the best way. Dr. Jared Spencer, and you can check me out there for more information. I love sharing this stuff with you guys. I'm going to hop off here with this PowerPoint and say one final goodbye. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I wish you all the best along your journey. Take care.
Hello and welcome into this carrier update. I'm Katie Falinger, executive producer of NAILBA's ID Network and host of Brokerage in Motion. And joining me is Phil Bouvier. He is the Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing and Individual Life at Symetra. Phil, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I'd like to talk with you about a program that's been getting a lot of buzz, and that is Symetra's instant issue program, Swift Term. So can you tell us a little bit about the product? How is it different than your competitors that offer instant decision programs?
Sure. Thanks again. And I appreciate having the opportunity to speak to everybody about what we feel is probably one of the more innovative steps we've taken as an industry, not just as Symetra, over the last several years. This is a product that came out of the pandemic, in fact. I've said many, many times in different forums that prior to the pandemic, we were E-nothing with aspirations to be E-something. And we were quickly on our way to E-everything with this product. So what we did was we've kind of walled off a group of people at Symetra to create this environment, this customer experience, where their primary objective, their primary goal that drove them was insurance in 20 minutes and everything that they could do to get us there. And in fact, they delivered that. One of the interesting things to come out of Swift Term was this three-step process where we're not just instant issue, although we have other opportunities. You would have instant issue, 20 minutes, roughly. You have a light touch, what we call light touch, which is usually about a day or 2 days. And then you have full underwriting. And today, 75% of our cases that we see coming through the Swift Term platform are coming through either instant issue, 15 to 20 minutes, or the light touch program with 2 to 3 days. So you're getting that process, and that does make it quite a bit different. The other thing that makes it a little bit different, it is convertible. So we do have some conversion opportunities there as well.
All right. Well, Swift is definitely the right way to describe it. I heard the fastest time from agent dropping the ticket to policy being delivered was 18 minutes. Is that legit?
Yeah, well, it actually is now 17. We find different ways, as we've developed the platform and the program, we did develop it with the idea of getting to market quickly. And so what we've been able to do is have iterations and improvements to the process come out on a regular basis. In fact, most recently, we had the opportunity to add 2 brokers to a case, which we didn't have previously, and that did open up some more opportunities for split cases. So as we continue to evolve our process and make the process better, we've found ways to improve the turnaround times as well.
That's fantastic. So let's continue the discussion on evolution here. Where are you seeing the opportunities for Swift Term outside of the traditional sale?
Yeah, and that's the interesting and exciting part, I think, for the entire industry, right? Because you don't want to just move the pieces of the pie around. You want to improve the pie. So we have had opportunities and situations uncovered by our sales team out in the field where those folks who may or may not have had the opportunity to write insurance, but didn't like the process, have now opened their eyes again to utilizing our typical traditional distribution and distribution partners to access markets they wouldn't have before. I'll give you an example. SBA loans, those loans, that process is an ongoing process. So on the one hand, you've got the loan folks filling out the loan forms, and then the process stops when the insurance conversation comes up, because now you've got to go away, and for 2 to 3 weeks, you've got to figure out a way to place an insurance policy if you don't have one. We've now gotten ourselves to the point where we can go into an SBA office, and that loan officer or that partner of theirs is now filling out the loan forms while simultaneously the loan applicant is filling out an application for Swift Term, and 75% of the time they have it within a day, and 25 to 30% of the time they have it within 15 to 20 minutes. So this is really something that has evolved that place in the market. I can tell you from my own experience, I did apply. It did take me 18 minutes. to complete the process. But in conversing with my broker, who works at a regional bank, they also uncovered this opportunity as someplace that they could use to expand their business opportunities for themselves. They really didn't think that insurance could be sold that quickly.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Now, are there plans to offer this for Symetra's permanent life products?
Yes, there are actually. This is, as we see this, the steps forward in the industry. I've just talked to a lot of groups over the last several months, and asking people to just lift up your head for a second, take a look around, and recognize that the future that we've all hoped for, that process that had become so onerous, is now here. That future is here. We do expect that over the next 18 to 24 months, we'll be able to come out on our permanent platform with this same solution. That will take us a little bit. There are some idiosyncrasies to permanent products that don't exist in term, but we are solving those today. And we expect that this is how we will go to market. We will be able to continue to expand our relationship with the reinsurers to improve the face amounts. As the experience evolves, so won't the opportunities that come back to us from our distribution partners with opportunities for improvement. That permanent sale is in the offing. We will have permanent instant issue sales. That's not to be confused, as we've seen in the marketplace. Instant everything seems to be the conversation. But when we mean instant issue permanent insurance and instant issue term insurance, we do mean instant, 18 to 24 minutes. So
that's fantastic stuff. Really exciting, I'm sure, for Symetra, and some really great information, obviously, and insight. So Phil Bouvier, Symetra's Senior VP of Sales and Marketing and Individual Life. Phil, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
You bet. Thank you, Katie.
Hello and welcome into this carrier update. I'm Katie Falinger, executive producer of NAILBA's ID Network and host of Brokerage in Motion. And joining me is Tracy Edgar. She's the AVP and life sales leader at Nationwide Financial. Tracy, it's always great to see you.
It's great to see you, Katie. It's been a little while, huh?
Yeah, it sure has been a while since you and I have talked, and also since you've joined Nationwide. So how are you doing? What's happening at Nationwide?
And things have been great there. It's just a really, really good fit for me. Nationwide and me, like, we're just working together to deliver on this bigger, noble purpose, to be there for our members, our partners, our associates, and our communities. Honestly, to be there with them when they need us the very most. It's weird. 2021 was a historic year with the Washington CARES Act. It created all this influx of applications, and it completely jammed up our systems, which really presented a challenge. And then, of course, we were in the midst of a pandemic, but honestly, despite all of that, all of our channels grew. Q1 of 2022 has also just been our biggest quarter yet, and we're continuing to grow. So we love that. But we really can't afford to rest on our laurels. So we're constantly looking at our business, and we're trying to ensure that we're continuously moving forward, specifically as it relates to technology, products, and pricing.
Yeah, let's talk technology a little more in depth if we could. What is Nationwide working on in the tech space?
Man, there's so much going on. It's hard to just boil it down and be really simple about it, but let me give it a shot. Nationwide's working really hard to get processing of our applications to straight through processing. In other words, when an advisor submits an application through their BGA or their IMO for a Nationwide life or long-term care product, he or she's going to do that on an electronic format. That's going to feed into an electronic application processing system, and it's going to come out the other side as a contract electronically that can be then delivered to the customer. The nice thing about the electronic format is that it's not only important to the speed of the application, but it's also important to the end customer, because that end customer can then share the contract with their trustee, they can share it with their attorney or their CPA, and most importantly, they can deliver it to their family members so that their family's aware that they have that product. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is make the process for those that write business with us through their BGA and IMO, just making it faster and easier.
Yeah, the efficiency is crucial, right? It's really interesting stuff. And you also mentioned earlier products and pricing. So what's new there?
Yeah, it's really interesting. We're trying to just ensure that customers have the best products and pricing at all times. And so as a result, we very recently made a product improvement to our Care Matters policy, where we reduced the price of that policy by 5% for all scenarios. Of course, the scenarios, can vary according to the characteristics of the case, but The other thing we did is we expanded the maximum issue ages. We used to only issue policies up to age 70, and now we issue them up to age 75 for single pay, 5 pay, and 10 pay cases, as long as the elected minimum refund of premium and the maximum LTC options are selected. The other thing we did, Katie, is we launched an IUL Accumulator 2 enhancement earlier this year. And those were changes that they're going to be important to the people who are selling our products. It's a new volatility controlled indices, actually 2 of them, and some other new investment options. We have higher participation rates. We have the plus strategy credit, higher target premiums. People like our brokers, our BGAs, and our producers all really like that. And then the surrender value enhancement rider and changes of insured rider. So the bottom line is that our product team specifically, is always sharpening their pencils to ensure we're delivering our promises to provide the best products at the best possible price.
All really great information. Tracy Edgar, Nationwide's AVP and Life Sales Leader, thank you so much for jumping on to give us an update.
It's been my pleasure. It's so great to see you again, Katie.
Likewise.
Hey everybody, this is Jason Bronchetti, the Chief Investment Officer at Lincoln Financial Group. I hope you're having a wonderful summer and enjoying the sunshine. For me, summer means feeling energized with tons of outdoor fun with the family. Within the walls of investments here at Lincoln, we're just as energized to release the latest edition of the Market Intel Exchange, the MIE. Now, if you're not familiar with the MIE, it's Lincoln's flagship market chart book that we launched last year. It's full of great information on the economy, markets, and investment trends from the folks at Lincoln and our partners across the asset management industry. I encourage you to check it out. So as in prior quarters, I'd like to cover 3 key themes that are likely to remain on the minds of investors in the quarter ahead. Let's jump right in with the first topic: stubbornly high levels of inflation, and perhaps even more importantly, the Fed's response to try to bring those prices down. Now, inflation continues to remain persistently high. We've had year-over-year headline and core consumer prices rising 9.1% and 5.9% respectively in June, and they remain at 40-year highs. So let's talk about what's been driving the increase in prices. Well, largely, we've had the classic demand pull inflation scenario of too many dollars chasing too few goods. Consumer demand for goods has surged, while at the same time, disruptions to the global supply chain have made it extremely challenging for suppliers to keep up since the COVID crisis. Adding to this is the war in Ukraine, which has contributed to a spike in commodity prices. Now, because commodities are such important inputs into the production and transportation of nearly everything we buy, this is feeding into higher prices that we've all been feeling, from gas at the pump to the grocery store. Now, the good news is we are seeing some positive signs that indicate we may start to see inflationary pressures ease in the back half of 2022. For example, with China continuing to reopen, supply chains have begun to normalize, allowing transportation costs for goods to come down. You can see this dynamic on the middle chart of this slide from the Market Intel Exchange, which shows the cost to ship a container from Shanghai to Los Angeles. While it's still well above pre-pandemic levels, it's fallen more than 38% from its peak, and the trend continues to show easing. Commodity prices are also beginning to show signs of coming off of their highs. The last chart on this slide shows the Bloomberg Commodity Index, which tracks more than 20 commodities futures, including energy, metals, and livestock. While prices are still meaningfully higher than they were 2 years ago, the index has fallen more than 14% from its recent peak set in early June. As for consumer demand, that's where the Fed comes in. So the Fed has made it abundantly clear that they're going to do, quote, whatever it takes to get inflation under control. Their primary tool to accomplish this is by increasing the Fed funds rate, which makes money more expensive to obtain and reduces aggregate demand. In March, they increased the Fed funds rate by 25 basis points, followed by 50 basis points in May and 75 basis points in June. Additional hikes are expected, with futures markets expecting the Fed funds rate to land in the range of 3.25 to 3.5% by the end of 2022. Now, this is a dynamic to keep an eye on. With economic growth moderating in the U.S., there's a growing concern that should the Fed get too aggressive in raising rates, it could tip us into a recession in the near term. which leads us to our second key theme that's on the mind of investors at the moment: fears of a potential recession. While the R word is certainly getting a lot of media attention, it's important to take a closer look at the fundamentals. This is a great reference chart from our partners at ClearBridge Investments. It monitors several different recession risk indicators and flags the current status of each indicator as either expansionary, cautionary, or recessionary. While the indicators have been trending negatively lately as the economy is starting to cool, you can see that as of quarter end, the overall recession risk signal was still flashing green. Now, I wouldn't be surprised to see the signals reflect more caution in the near future. That being said, most of the asset managers we work with don't actually have a recession as their baseline forecast. And perhaps more importantly, it's critical to remember that recessions come in all shapes and sizes. If the US were to enter a recession in the next 12 to 18 months, we would expect it to be relatively moderate and nothing compared to what was experienced during the global financial crisis. The fact is, the economy is in a much better position today than it was leading up to 2008. For starters, we're not in a serious housing bubble. Lending standards are still very strong compared to the global financial crisis. And while we could see some housing price weakness, we don't expect any material default spikes like we saw in 2008 and 2009. We're also less likely to experience the same financial contagion risk. This is in large part due to the regulatory framework and the stress testing that was put in place by financial institutions after the GFC. And lastly, consumer strength is a notable difference. Unemployment, wages, and household debt service ratios are considerably better today than they were back then. Consumers are not over-levered to the same extent as the period leading up to the global financial crisis. So again, despite the very real risk that the US economy could slip into a recession, it's likely to be relatively mild in severity. All of that said, the lingering unknowns have led to risk assets beginning to price in the potential for an economic downturn, pushing the S&P 500 officially into bear market territory in mid-June. And therein lies our final key theme on the markets and on the minds of investors: bear markets. While the volatility that typically comes with bear markets can be uncomfortable for nearly every investor, it's important to remain focused on the long term. The fact is, there hasn't been a bear market yet that stocks haven't fully recovered from and gone on to set new highs, and this time isn't likely to be any different. Historically, bear markets have been some of the best times to invest, and this chart in the MIE can help put that into perspective. We took a look at forward 1, 3, and 5-year returns, not from the bottom of each bear market, but instead from the point where the drawdown had reached 20%, the typical threshold to be considered a bear market and roughly consistent with where we ended the second quarter. So as you can imagine, returns from that point were very strong. On average, the S&P 500 gained more than 17% 1 year later, and cumulative returns 3 and 5 years later were 36% and 61% respectively. While I'm certainly not going to call the bottom in the market, we feel this type of data can help every investor feel confident staying the course, regardless of whether stocks have bottomed yet or not. So there you have it, 3 key themes on the minds of investors today. Persistently high inflation that's showing some signs that it may be rolling over. Concerns that slowing growth and a tightening Fed could push the US economy into a recession. And last, bear markets and the opportunity that they have historically presented for long-term investors. Lincoln Financial is constantly monitoring what's happening in the markets, finding new ways to keep you informed, and most importantly, working to ensure we continue providing everyday Americans with the financial security and peace of mind.